This is simply unbelievable. Car owners in Pakistan can't afford imported shipping containers, so they're ready to spend 120,000 rupees to have them handmade in local workshops. Despite the fact that the pure iron sheeted carriage hasn't even been loaded yet, it's already flattened the tires due to its weight. But all he cares about is the weight it can carry. A Pakistani driver, just enriched, has just assembled this used small truck from a nearby repair shop using second-hand parts. To keep expanding his transport fleet in the cargo market, even though this truck's engine is only 120 horsepower, he is sure the chassis is long enough to install a container without any issues. Thus, to ensure it can carry enough weight, the crossbeams of the carriage need to be dense enough. Although Pakistani truck assembly lines are all completed in open-air environments, their craftsmanship from chassis to workmanship is still very particular. There's never any cutting corners in the materials used for the chassis sub-beams and crossbeams, and every piece of channel steel is welded very solidly by workers. From the masterful welding posture of the workers, you can see how popular being a welder is in Pakistan. To ensure a firmer connection between the chassis sub-beams and the chassis itself, they also use these shorter U-shaped bolts for fixation. To ensure the carriage's chassis is flat enough, workers also need to use hammers to correct each piece of channel steel. After correcting each carriage crossbeam, the bent iron plates can be laid flat above the chassis for assembly. Since it's assembly line production, the efficiency of chassis assembly is greatly improved. With the cooperation of 3 worker masters, all the exposed crossbeams are quickly wrapped up. Then, using spot welding with electric welding on the assembled iron plates to prevent displacement later. The missing parts are also not overlooked by the masters. They will cut the iron plates to the appropriate size according to the measured dimensions for assembly. Because there are so many crossbeams on the chassis, workers can only weld a little bit under the car, while the master above needs to step on it to make the iron plate and channel steel fit better. Next, they start welding the protective plates on both sides of the container, aligning themselves with international standards. Its surface is as uneven as its inner self. Before assembly, workers will move all the protective plates to one side for assembly. This way, they will know how many iron sheets are needed for one side of the protective plates before assembly. After all the iron sheets are in place, they can use electric welding to connect the iron sheets. Because this small workshop only has one welding machine, other masters can only watch on the side during welding. Fortunately, the master's welding speed is fast enough. While welding, other idle masters use grinders to grind the welds to obtain a high-quality welding surface. Subsequently, reinforcement welding is done at the top of the protective plates using square pipes. Square pipes, as reinforcements, provide additional support and stability, preventing bending or deformation of the protective plates. After reinforcing with square pipes, they spare no expense to hire a crane to easily raise the entire protective plate. Once aligned with the chassis, the entire protective plate can be welded on top. Luckily, the assisting masters are older, otherwise, they wouldn't dare to stare straight at the welding rod while welding. Before the overall welding, a copper-restricted device needs to be bolted and welded to the bottom of the protective plate. This way, the copper-restricted device will serve as a positioning device during welding. In order to make the protective plate parallel to the edge of the chassis, a channel steel will be used to flatten the protective plate before welding. Although the equipment used is relatively simple, it demonstrates high-end manual skills. Since the length of the assembled protective plate is 9.8 meters, other workers need to support it to prevent it from shaking during welding. After an hour, one side of the protective plate is finally welded completely. The other side of the protective plate is assembled and welded using the same method. Then, they place a scaffold at the rear of the carriage, and a worker climbs up to use a pre-cut channel steel to connect the protective plates on both sides, serving as support, thus connecting the protective plates on both sides together. To enhance the structure and stability of the carriage, they observe the weak chassis and tires, which stand in stark contrast to the grand carriage. Due to the extremely cramped workspace, welding workers can only jump to the driver's cabin first and pull up the protective plates passed from below. After assembling the 2 iron sheets, they can proceed with electric welding. To address the issue of tilting and deformation of the carriage, they also installed support frames internally. Once completed, they move the scaffold to the rear, where the carriage requires larger square pipes for reinforcement. This ensures better support for the weight of the carriage doors and prevents sagging or deformation. Due to the urgency from the rich client, the boss had to borrow a welding machine from a nearby repair shop to quickly weld the mudguards on both sides of the tires. While welding the carriage roof, they crisscross many elongated triangular irons from top to bottom. This provides support when installing the top iron sheets, allowing the roof to bear more weight to prevent weld joint fractures. After ensuring everything is foolproof, they proceed with the sequential assembly and welding. After nearly 2 days of welding, the carriage takes shape. When the boss receives a call from the rich client saying they can deliver this afternoon, he's ecstatic because earning 60,000 rupees in just 2 days is more than what he earns from regular repairs. While excited, he doesn't stop working. He applies putty to every weld joint, concealing any irregularities and enhancing corrosion resistance. Once all the welds are puttied, they start spraying primer to create a protective layer and improve adhesion between the coating and the substrate. After the primer fully dries and cures, they begin the painting process. This forms another layer of protection and further enhances adhesion between the coating and the substrate. They begin spraying the white topcoat paint. After the paint is applied, the entire container looks much more upscale. Additionally, they manually crafted the doors. After the rich client inspected the goods and found no issues, and after half a month of use, despite only a few tire blowouts, the overall quality is still very good. Let's give them a thumbs up for their superb craftsmanship.